Video contains violent content, details that are not suitable for common perception. Please consider before watching. Chapter 52. You become my disciple. Mok Jae-un's eyes sharpened at Diviner Zhou's words. He was already quite displeased from being manipulated by the technique earlier. Did he do something unnecessary? Mok Jae-un surveyed his surroundings, rolling his eyes. No one was visible for now, and no unusual presences were detected. Was it because of his confidence in handling things alone that he lured him here with the technique? 10 steps. With this distance, he seemed capable of subduing him. He had become faster after learning the light body technique. And compared to martial artists, the physical abilities of sorcerers were significantly inferior. If I kill him before he uses sorcery, there's no one around, so it's a misconception if you think you can do anything to me. He wasn't as inattentive as expected, but there was definitely no presence. And he hadn't taken out any talismans or anything. Trying once wouldn't hurt. Gasp. Mok Jae-un hesitated. The moment he slightly lifted his foot off the ground, he felt the surrounding energy distorting. That strange energy when he let go of the carriage. It was similar to that, but this time it was sharp like swinging a weapon. Quite sensitive, aren't you? A glint of interest flashed in Diviner Zhou's eyes. Naturally, he had expected that if the fellow was smart, he would find a way to escape the technique. That's why he had prepared in advance. To survive in this treacherous world, preparation must be thorough. That's the first lesson I'll give you. At his words, Mok Jae-un surveyed his surroundings. No talismans or anything like that were visible. But why did he feel that ominous sensation the moment he tried to take a step? Sorcery indeed had depths the more one delved into it. Mok Jae-un looked at Diviner Zhou and spoke. I never said I would become your disciple. Do you think you have a choice? I can see you have a lot of interest in me, but I also have my own stance. Stance? Ha! Diviner Zhou scoffed. Then he immediately took something out from his waist. It was a wooden puppet with a talisman attached that read Seal. Diviner Zhou tossed and caught it, saying, Don't you want to get this back? Seeing this, Mok Jae-un tilted his head slightly. Then, out of curiosity, he sent death energy into his eyes and looked at the wooden puppet, and it seemed like something was inside. But the energy was barely detectable, making it difficult to notice without focusing. Have you already forgotten what you were trying to protect? Don't tell me that's... Yes, it is. Did you think I would leave such a dangerous thing there? You're an interesting fellow. Even among excellent sorcerers, few have taken a vengeful spirit as a familiar. Diviner Zhou only realized it after sealing the evil spirit into the wooden puppet. Not only did he self-learn sorcery, but he also took a vengeful spirit as a familiar, something even outstanding sorcerers struggled to do. He was undoubtedly a talent that couldn't be more desirable as a disciple. I don't know how you did it, but if you obediently agree to become my disciple, I can return this to you. He thought it was a pretty good offer. The fellow must have done considerable research of his own to take a vengeful spirit as a familiar. So he believed he wouldn't easily want to lose his servant ghost. However, you don't have to return it. What? It has already left my hands, so what can I do? Huh. Look at this guy. He must have struggled a lot to make the vengeful spirit his servant ghost, but he's giving it up so easily? Is he deliberately putting on a strong front? Then you're fine with me destroying this vengeful spirit? Do as you wish. The complete lack of reluctance was absurd. His thinking differs from ordinary sorcerers. No, is it because he originally comes from a martial arts background? If he destroyed this vengeful spirit as the fellow said, it would make him seem narrow-minded. After all, a master's capacity should appear vast. Diviner Zhou tossed the wooden puppet towards Mok Jae-un. Take it. Why are you giving it to me? Do you think my capacity is so small that I would covet something belonging to a prospective disciple? At his words, Mok Jae-un scoffed inwardly. He desperately wants him as a disciple. What should he do? For now there were 3 options. Kill Diviner Zhou and escape, taking somewhat of a risk without knowing what trap there might be, or pretend to agree to be his disciple while dealing with him and escaping. Lastly, infiltrate heaven and earth society by becoming his disciple, despite the danger. It was the riskiest among the 3. If he encountered the person who appeared back then, sensing his pursuit, he could definitely be killed before even taking revenge. The second option seems better after all. It was the most appealing method. It was also the method he enjoyed using the most originally. At that moment, Diviner Joe spoke. If I were you, I wouldn't refuse the offer. Why? Becoming my disciple would at least increase your chances of survival, so why hesitate? Having arbitrarily learned the Manor's secret manual, do you think you have a high probability of surviving if you go there? I think not. It's a place where your life hangs by a thread based on the sect leader or executive's moods. If you become my disciple, you can at least raise that probability. Mok Jae-un showed no change in expression. Seeing his reaction, Diviner Joe clicked his tongue inwardly. Is this approach ineffective with this fellow? Well, he's someone who bargained with Bright Blade King while holding a sword to his own throat. Does he have no attachment to his life? Or is he thoroughly calculative? If it's the latter, the method needs to be changed. Diviner Joe clicked his tongue and said, You're the type to just break if I push too hard, I see. Fine, then how about this? Although you'll learn it anyway if you become my disciple, I'll teach you the sorcery to contain a familiar in a medium. What does that mean? It's exactly as it sounds. Don't you have a similar example in your hand right now? At those words, Mok Jae-un looked at the wooden puppet in his hand. The wooden puppet with seal written on it emitted no energy whatsoever. Mok Jae-un's eyes sparkled as he stared intently at it. Seems like you're interested in this sort of thing. Diviner Joe smirked. He had thought the fellow would naturally show interest. He would definitely need it if he wants to carry that vengeful spirit around intact. Otherwise, sorcerers would try to subdue it without knowing it's a familiar whenever it's noticed. What Mok Jae-un needed right now was this sorcery, he believed. And that prediction was spot on. Concealing a familiar's energy. Mok Jae-un was already seeking such a method. It was a more appealing offer than the earlier mention of his life. If there were outstanding sorcerers or supreme masters like Bright Blade King around, he couldn't keep Chong Ryong or the evil spirit close. Seeing Mok Jae-un's interest, Diviner Joe said, How about it? Are you inclined to become my disciple now? If I become your disciple, I can learn what you just mentioned? Of course. At this, Mok Jae-un said, Then teach me that technique first. I will become your disciple then. Teach you first? Teaching it is not difficult at all. But if you want to learn it, you have to swear an oath first. It wouldn't be that easy. Mok Jae-un licked his lips slightly, having expected he wouldn't readily agree. Diviner Joe took out something else from his waist. It was a small iron chain. Take it. Swish. Clang. Mok Jae-un caught it and looked puzzled. Then Diviner Joe said, Wear that on your wrist and say this. I, Mok Jae-un, will become Zhou Yuigong's disciple and follow his will. Suspicion clouded Mok Jae-un's eyes at those words. Wear this iron chain and say it? Yes. It doesn't seem like you're just telling me to do it. Of course not. How can I trust and simply accept as a disciple someone who tried to escape despite being practically a hostage? Then what happens if I make that oath? The man, now revealed to be Diviner Zhou Yuigong, answered with a smile. A restriction is imposed. Restriction. If you make that oath, you won't be able to harm me in any way. It's almost absolute. Of course, you'll have no choice but to obligatorily follow my commands. When accepting a disciple he liked, Diviner Zhou Yuigong would pass on this oath chain. By staking one's own self and swearing an oath through the oath chain, one becomes absolutely unable to refuse his orders. But he didn't mention that, knowing the fellow wouldn't readily comply if he did. How will he respond? But the fellow was so suspicious that he might not easily swear the oath. While he was thinking that, Mok Jae-un put on the iron chain and spoke. Please keep your promise. I, Mok Jae-un, will become Zhou Yuigong's disciple and follow his will. The moment those words ended, the iron chain subtly shook and rattled. Seeing this, Zhou Yuigong raised the corners of his mouth in satisfaction. With this, I've got him. He was the type who had to obtain what he wanted to feel at ease. Zhou Yuigong took out something folded in leather from his bosom. Take it. Swish. Mok Jae-un snatched it with one hand. It was titled, Corpse Inquiry Secret Manual. What is this? It's a sorcery technique I created. Memorize it entirely and return it while we head back to Heaven and Earth Society. You're not keeping your promise? How could that be? The sorcery you want is also in there. Thank you. Call me Master. Thank you, Master. Pleased with being called Master, Diviner Zhou Yuigong got down from the rock he was leaning on, grasped his walking stick and walked off somewhere. Mok Jiangun said, "Aren't you going to release the technique you set up?" If he didn't undo it, he couldn't even take a single step. In response to this question, Diviner Zhou Yuigong smiled and said, "I'll give you about an hour." What? The method to undo the sorcery is also in there, so look for it carefully. If you can't find it and return within that time, quite an arduous situation will unfold. Ha ha ha. With those words, Diviner Zhou Yuigong entered the forest to the southeast and disappeared. Mok Jiangun let out a soft snicker. Is he already trying to teach him? Interesting. He didn't care what method was used. As long as he could extract what he needed, that was enough. Swish. Not long after, someone lightly descended from the sky. It was none other than Chong Ryong. The sorcerer has finally left your side. Mok Jiangun looked at her with suspicion in his eyes. You're not a fake, right? Fake? What nonsense are you spouting? More importantly, it was amusing to see you caught in the sorcery, jumping in place alone. You should have done it a bit longer. It's really you. On what basis are you so certain it's really me? Well, there are reasons. Should he say it's a feeling? Chong Ryong asked Mok Jiangun. But why did you do such a thing unlike your usual self? What thing? I'm asking why you made such an oath when that chain seems to contain quite a strong curse. To obtain this, Mok Jiangun waved the corpse inquiry secret manual at her. She snorted and said, "You did that to get that sort of thing? Did you suddenly become stupid? Or are you confident you can escape that curse? There's no need to escape or anything." What? Mok Jiangun casually removed the iron chain he had on his arm. She frowned and asked, "Is it originally that easy to take off?" No. In the first place, an oath is something you have to swear by staking your own name. Ha. At those words, Chong Ryong finally understood why Mok Jiangun had made such an oath. Mok Jiangun wasn't his real name in the first place. Naturally, there was no way the oath would be established and a curse imposed. So that's how it is. That brat wouldn't do something detrimental just to learn sorcery. Since you got what you wanted, are you going to attempt to escape again? I was considering it, but now I'm conflicted. Changed your mind? Yes. I'm thinking it might be better to enter the darkest place. Although the risk was significant, in a way it was the darkest place. Chong Ryong showed a peculiar gaze at Mok Jiangun's words. Mok Jiangun asked, "Seems like you have something to say. I also had something I wanted to ask." What kind of sophistry is saying you have something to ask when you say I seem to have something to say? I mean, I want to ask first. What is it? Why do they think it's real after seeing the sword techniques you showed, not the 8 postures of destruction? That was something he had been curious about. At Mok Jiangun's words, Chong Ryong closed her mouth. Do you not want to tell me? Phew. She silently smoked her pipe and exhaled the smoke. Usually, such a reaction meant she had no intention of telling him. Mok Jiangun shrugged his shoulders. Well, if that's the case, there's nothing I can do. I need to take a look at this for now. That way both the evil spirit and Chong Ryong can be by my side. Are you really going there? What? To Heaven and Earth Society. At her somewhat serious question, Mok Jiangun recalled the gaze on the rooftop. Those blood-red eyes seemed as if they would dye everything in blood. But even now that fury slightly shows. Depending on the situation. How coincidental. What is the situation? What are you trying to say? At Mok Jiangun's question, Chong Ryong exhaled a long puff of smoke and extended her hand to Mok Jiangun, saying, "If you're really going there, become my disciple." Mok Jiangun scratched his head. Today he seemed to hear people telling him to become their disciple here and there. He even heard it from Chong Ryong of all people. I don't know your reason for saying that, but there's no need for a master-disciple relationship between us. The weight is different. What? Becoming my disciple means you will bear the karma of the moon and carry out a bloody purge. Chapter 53. The weight is different. What? Becoming my disciple means you will bear the karma of the moon and carry out a bloody purge. A bloody purge? Chong Ryong's aura, brimming with murderous intent, was different from usual. But thinking about it, she was a vengeful spirit. Her resentment was so deep that she had existed in this world for over 100 years. Mok Jae-eun opened his mouth while making eye contact with her. As I thought, you have a connection with Heaven and Earth Society. I won't deny that. But why are you talking about Moon's karma and bloody purge when it comes to becoming your disciple? It's exactly as you heard. I desire a price in blood. In simple terms, revenge. At those words, Chong Ryung took a long drag from her pipe as if displeased and exhaled the smoke into Mok Jae-eun's face, saying, "Phew. Though the weight may be different if put in your terms, yes, it's revenge." A glint of interest flashed in Mok Jae-eun's eyes at her words. It was due to the shared sentiment of revenge. He too was wandering like this to avenge his grandfather. However, unlike her, he would resolve this grudge while alive, not after death. He said, "What will you do? Will you become my disciple? Don't you think you should at least tell me why I need to become your disciple for me to decide whether to accept or not?" That's... No. If you're not going to Heaven and Earth Society, just forget what I said. Seems like you have the ability to raise someone's interest and then make it fizzle out. Humph. I wasn't saying it to pique your interest. Mok Jae-eun stared intently at Chong Ryung. In fact, Mok Jae-eun had no interest whatsoever in other people's circumstances or stories. Even if they shared the sentiment of revenge. He had told Chong Ryung to share her circumstances, but it was merely to see if she could convince him why he should become her disciple. Can I ask you one thing? If it's a question I can't answer, don't even bother asking in the first place. That's up to you. Given Chong Ryung's caliber, you must have died a very long time ago, so hasn't time already taken revenge for you? Chong Ryung scoffed at Mok Jae-eun's words. Then she asked, "If it were you, would you just let your enemy go, thinking time will resolve everything?" "No. Why not? Isn't that what you were implying just now?" "I got hit back." Mok Jae-eun shrugged his shoulders and continued. "You're right. If you're going to take revenge, you have to see it through to the end. You can't just leave everything related to that person alone. Family, relatives, everything precious must be taken away. If one is going to take revenge, there's no reason to consider circumstances or hold back." At least that was Mok Jae-eun's idea of revenge. Chong Ryung opened her mouth, her red lips quivering. "Our intentions align. I feel the same way. I can't forgive that his despicable bloodline still breathes or that the truth is buried, insulting me. In that case, I'll take everything away with my own hands. Even if it means staining everything with blood." Wung. Mok Jae-eun pointed his hand while looking around. Perhaps due to her immense fury being unleashed, the surroundings were in chaos as if a storm was raging. Even the surroundings were being dyed in a blood-red hue. "Calm down." At Mok Jae-eun's words, she seemed to realize this and calmed herself. Then the sudden changes in the surroundings stopped as if nothing had happened. Witnessing this, Mok Jae-eun clicked his tongue inwardly. If Chong Ryung was like this, how dangerous and powerful would a vengeful spirit of even higher caliber be? He was curious. But that wasn't what mattered now. "Chong Ryung. Speak. Even if I'm not your disciple, couldn't we carry out your revenge together if the situation aligns?" "No." "What?" "It only has meaning if you, a mortal, inherit the moon's karma." "So what exactly is this moon's karma?" "You will naturally find out if you go there as my disciple." "You're stubborn. Then I just won't become your disciple." "What?" A frown formed on Chong Ryung's beautiful brow. She spoke in a voice filled with irritation. "Then you won't go to Heaven and Earth Society?" "No. I'll go. I've decided to go." "Then why?" A resounding cry rang in his ears and Mok Jae-eun furrowed his brow. Chong Ryung wanted to forcefully have her way, but she couldn't due to the relationship between a familiar and its master. It was truly an annoying relationship. Because of this, she was restrained and unable to do anything. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun said, "Sorry, but I don't like being controlled by someone. That applies even to you, whom I currently trust to some extent." "Annoying. Still, there's no other way." "I said it's annoying," Chong Ryung shouted, her hands trembling. She was furious at the reality of being a young brat's familiar and being manipulated. She had barely escaped from being sealed and possessed the caliber to move freely, not just as a ground-bound spirit, but what was this? She wanted to kill him and vent her frustration. But if she did that, the 100 years she had endured ruminating on her grudge would become meaningless. Damn that stubborn mortal. It was frustrating that that boy hadn't even lived half of 100 years. After glaring at Mok Jae-eun for a long time, she opened her mouth. Fine. Let me at least tell you this. I don't know the current situation, but originally Heaven and Earth Society was born from 3 lineages. 3 lineages? One of them is the moon lineage. And Chong Ryong is a person from that moon lineage. He's quick-witted at least. Chong Ryong didn't deny it. This is all I can tell you for now. Since 100 years have passed anyway, it's meaningless to investigate what happened back then. Not everything from that era will remain the same, so you just need to inherit the moon's karma. She stared intently into Mok Jae-eun's eyes. With other humans, she could tell what they were thinking just by looking at their eyes or expressions, but she couldn't figure out what this particular mortal was thinking. She wasn't sure if his emotions other than anger were genuine. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun readily said, "All right. Phew. Your stubbornness is really... What? I said I'll learn from you. You'll become my disciple? Yes. But I have a condition." "What condition?" "Let's just skip the formalities of calling each other master and disciple." "Presumptuous mortal. Even if you're my servant ghost, I don't call you master either." She clicked her tongue at Mok Jae-eun but soon nodded. Well, it didn't matter anyway. Normally, as the one receiving martial arts instruction, it would be proper to clarify the master-disciple relationship, but she was already dead. What meaning did etiquette and morality in this world hold? Seeing her like this, Mok Jae-eun faintly smiled. In fact, if he was going to Heaven and Earth Society anyway, he was in a position where he needed to learn the remaining techniques of her swordsmanship and the essentials of chi circulation from her. If anything, he was the one who needed to make the request. "Why are you nitpicking?" "It's nothing. More importantly, we need to hurry." "What do you mean?" "It's difficult to keep doing this here." Mok Jae-eun opened the corpse inquiry secret manual he was holding. He needed to undo the technique so he could lift his feet within an hour. And he also needed to grasp the sorcery to conceal Chong Ryong's energy. Half a moment before an hour passed. The surroundings were hectic. The masked individuals who had been absent were returning one by one. Diviner Zhou Yuigong looked towards the northwestern forest with slightly disappointed eyes. It was taking longer than expected. In fact, an hour wasn't that long. Because even for a designated technique, grasping sorcery within an hour was quite difficult. In this situation where he had to find what technique it was within the corpse inquiry secret manual, it was quite pressing. I thought it might be possible. If he failed, the given situation might have been more difficult than he anticipated. Then there was no choice. He would have to personally go and undo the technique for him. It was at that moment. A figure walking out of the dark forest was seen. It was none other than Mok Jae-eun. What? How did this fellow? The masked individuals who spotted Mok Jae-eun were surprised to see him outside the luggage carriage and tried to subdue him again. Diviner Zhou Yuigong stopped them. "Halt. But that child is now my disciple. I merely had him train for a bit." "What?" The masked individuals glanced at Mok Jae-eun and Diviner Zhou Yuigong with slightly surprised eyes. They seemed taken aback, not expecting him to really accept him as a disciple. However, Diviner Zhou was their superior, and they couldn't disobey him, so they soon returned to their positions. Diviner Zhou said to Mok Jae-eun, who was looking around, "You're later than expected." No, in fact, it was beyond expectations. He had really found and undone the technique within an hour. However, having accepted him as a disciple, he intended to refrain from praise as much as possible. Mok Jae-eun slightly bowed his head and replied, "If I'm late, I apologize. Master. I have expectations for you, so don't disappoint me. I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, undoing the technique must have consumed a lot of mental strength, so rest for a bit. We'll depart as soon as Bright Blade King arrives." "Understood." With those words, Mok Jae-eun looked around. But he had been curious about something for a while. The masked individuals had brought in pairs of boys who looked around 15 to 18 years old. They all had hoods covering their faces so he couldn't see in front of them. Mok Jae-eun asked in a low voice, "Who are they?" In response to that question, Diviner Zhou Yuigong chuckled and replied, "They are new recruits gathered by each faction." "New recruits? Since we're here anyway, you can consider it killing 2 birds with 1 stone." It was difficult to understand what he was saying. In the first place, he seemed to be deliberately vague about it. You'll find out later, so there's no need to be interested in such things now. From now on, you'll ride in my carriage with me, so go and rest there in advance. He pointed to a clean-looking carriage, not a luggage carriage. Seeing this, Mok Jung-un shook his head and said, I apologize, master. Is it alright if I just ride in the luggage carriage I was originally in for a while? What? Diviner Zhou Yuigong made a puzzled expression but soon spoke as if he understood. Is it because of your younger brother? Of course not, but Mok Jung-un nodded as if it was. Zhou Yuigong clicked his tongue at him and said, You're unnecessarily bringing hardship upon yourself. If you change your mind, switch to my carriage. Understood. And I'm warning you, but this time you were able to leave because I intended it, but don't even dream of trying to help your younger brother escape or anything like that. If you do something needless, you'll witness Yun Mok Sword Manor being annihilated. I'll keep that in mind. Since I've become your disciple, such a thing won't happen. Of course it shouldn't. Diviner Zhou Yuigong grinned. Anyway, since he was wearing the oath chain, he wouldn't be able to disobey his orders. Mok Jung-un said to him, who was smiling, Master, is it possible for you to send away the person monitoring inside the luggage carriage with your authority? If it's difficult even with Master's authority, it's fine. I just wanted to quietly memorize this while inside the carriage. Mok Jung-un spoke, holding up the Corpse Inquiry Secret Manual. At his words, Diviner Zhou Yuigong, who was about to refuse, soon nodded. It was because the former part of what he said bothered him more than the latter. Do you think I lack even that much authority? All right. Thank you. But don't do anything that might arouse suspicion. Even if you've become my disciple, it won't be good to provoke Bright Blade King. Understood. The corners of Mok Jung-un's mouth slightly rose as he bowed his head in gratitude. Mok Jung-un entered the luggage carriage, closed the door and took out something from his bosom. It was a small wooden puppet the size of a finger, shaped like a person with the character Connect engraved on it. Mok Jung-un smiled and whispered softly, It's a success. Success or whatever, I'm suffocating. Being trapped in this damn wooden puppet. The voice coming from the wooden puppet was none other than Chong Ryung. Mok Jung-un had successfully concealed her energy. If Diviner Zhou Yuigong found out that he had not only undone the technique within an hour but also roughly grasped this technique, he would have been astonished. He thought Mok Jung-un had barely undone the technique and came out. Mok Jung-un placed the wooden puppet on his palm and said, Just bear with it for a bit. She came out of this, the unique energy of a vengeful spirit would be revealed. It wouldn't be good for Diviner Zhou Yuigong to notice. At that moment, the wooden puppet trembled and moved on its own, wriggling on Mok Jung-un's palm. Then a grumbling voice came out. Now I've even possessed this damn wooden puppet. You have no idea how difficult this is, you mortal. The method Zhou Yuigong had taught was none other than possessing a medium. It was a technique similar to sealing. So Chong Ryung couldn't exert any power inside this wooden puppet. Or so he thought, but that wasn't the case. The evil spirit was unable to, but she could break the wooden puppet and come out at will. It seemed to be due to the difference in caliber. Be careful. It cracked again. How much more careful can I be here? Even a decent physical body can't endure this body of mine. That's true. It was enduring thanks to the technique that controlled her energy. Otherwise, the wooden puppet would have shattered long ago. Chong Ryung, now a wooden puppet, sat on his palm and said, But if this technique is used well, it seems I can somehow endure even in a weak body. That was the one thing she found consoling. Yes. So please bear with it for a bit. Once we get there, I'll have you enter a suitable body. All right. Anyway, I've secured a decent training place until we reach there. He hadn't had high expectations, but securing the inside of the luggage carriage was quite a gain. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to do anything. At least while traveling, the conditions were set for him to quietly receive that sword art from Chong Ryung and practice the reverse chi circulation technique. But what are you going to do with that fellow? Kek kek kek. Chong Ryung moved the clumsy hand of the wooden puppet and pointed at someone. It was Mok Yucheon, who was still unconscious. Mok Jung-un approached him, tied the loosened cloth to cover his eyes and then, Taig. He struck the mute acupoint again. With this, Mok Yucheon returned to his original state. Keeping him like this will keep him quiet, right? You're really something else. Chapter 54. In a dark forest. A woman with an enchanting appearance, wearing a bamboo hat, was hanging from the top of a tree, gazing in a certain direction. A very faint light could be seen in the distance. About 100 jang away, that place was the campsite of Heaven and Earth Society. Shit. What am I doing? Grumbling inwardly, her identity was Ha Chai Rin, a candidate for the sect leader of flying killing. No, it was guard Go Chan who had possessed Ha Chai Rin's body. He had been tracking Mok Jae-eun ever since he was practically kidnapped after being immobilized by Bright Blade King. Normally, when tracking, one would get closer than this, but due to the monstrous Master Bright Blade King, he maintained this distance out of fear of getting too close and being discovered. At least I can follow since I roughly know the location. The problem lay elsewhere. As a familiar, he was connected, so he could instinctively sense where Mok Jae-eun was. However, there was no way to get close. In fact, if it weren't for being a familiar, it would have been the perfect opportunity to distance himself from Mok Jae-eun. But the farther he got, the more strangely anxious he became, making it impossible to escape. No, it was impossible from the beginning. Because if Mok Jae-eun died, he too would be annihilated. Phew. How did it come to this? Even he found his predicament ridiculous. He had retired due to lack of talent and aimed to live quietly, but not only did he die absurdly, but now he was trapped in this wench's body, serving as a slave. I'm so unlucky. It would be difficult to have such a wretched fate. Anyway, to remain in this world even a little longer, he had no choice but to serve Mok Jae-eun well. I need to find a way to infiltrate somehow. For now, he was doing this while keeping an eye on Bright Blade King, but he couldn't just keep following at a distance. He needed a way to naturally infiltrate Heaven and Earth Society. Right. Instead of continuing like this, I should find that method first. He was a former assassin after all. He was experienced in infiltrating places. And if he delved into Ha Chai Rin's memories, there was an infiltration method he had never tried before. Seduction. My ass. He shuddered as he unnecessarily recalled a memory. No matter what, he wanted to maintain his last shred of self-respect. Thud thud. Half a month passed like that. The method of travel was repetitive. Every other day they would pass through somewhere, and each time the masked individuals would bring boys aged 15 to 18. Repeating this, the number of people had already swelled to over 100. Curious as to why they were doing this, he asked diviner Zhou Yuigong a couple of times, but the answer he received was that it wasn't something for him to be concerned about. Why would that be? At Mok Jae-eun's question, a voice rang out from the wooden puppet on his shoulder. I don't know. Didn't you say you were in Heaven and Earth Society? It's been 100 years since I left. How would I know how the organization operates now? She also found it difficult to understand why. There was one speculation, but the method was quite strange. She wondered if there was a need to bring in manpower in this way. I keep feeling like the way you speak sometimes makes it sound like Heaven and Earth Society belonged to you. You're not denying it? Nonsense. Chong Ryong strangely disliked talking about the past. Was it because even recalling memories made her angry? Or was there something she wanted to hide? Mok Jae-eun found this strange, but it was only for a fleeting moment, and he soon erased that question from his mind. What mattered was from now on. We'll be arriving soon. Why are you getting nervous? I don't know. It's good to be nervous. Even if you learn the sword techniques of the moon lineage from me at your level, you're barely at the threshold of first rate at best. The beginning of first rate. That was Mok Jae-eun's current martial arts level. Just half a month ago he was barely at the threshold of going from third rate to second rate. However, by absorbing and internalizing a significant amount of death energy gained from the fight at Yun Mok Sword Manor, he formed a Danjian equivalent to half a gap. In terms of internal energy alone, he had reached first rate. If others knew about this, it would be a shocking event. In fact, although she was talking about it casually, Chong Ryong was also quite surprised. It can't be attributed to luck alone. Even though he had encountered the postures of thought destruction, known as the Supreme Secret Manual, and various situations that were almost predestined, it was hard to deny that he was remarkable. Reaching the beginning of first rate in less than a month after starting to learn martial arts was truly astonishing. Perhaps because he started late, martial fortune followed him. But he still has a long way to go. Even if he had grown at an amazingly fast pace, the situation remained unfavorable. Considering that even when she was alive, there were quite a few masters above first rate in Heaven and Earth Society, there might be even more now. With Mok Jae-eun's current skill level, Forget about avenging his grandfather, it was impossible to even carry on the moon's karma. He needs to become stronger faster. To do that, there was a need to push him even harder. From first rate onward was the realm of enlightenment. If he couldn't gain enlightenment, it could take a year or even a decade to advance further. And if he was unlucky, he could remain stagnant for life. At a glance, there were countless mountain peaks, and a river like a single vein of blood flowed between them. The place below the setting sun was quite spectacular. With the river as a base, the mountain peaks formed natural fortifications, creating a large city. This was the base of Heaven and Earth Society, which currently held a third of the power in the martial world of the Central Plains. The inner city located in the center of the city. Creek. As the city gate opened, a large-statured man riding a horse like a victorious general entered, and the warriors lined up in 2 rows from the inner city cheered. Wah! The man at the forefront was Sun Yun, one of the 5 kings of Heaven and Earth Society, known as Bright Blade King. Behind him followed a procession of about 300 people. The men in black attire were the warriors of Heaven and Earth Society, and about 100 were the boys they had brought this time. Startled by the cheers, the boys trembled and took 1 step forward at a time. The procession passed through the main road of the inner city and led to a wide square. Ho! A glint of interest flashed in the eyes of Bright Blade King Sun Yun, who arrived first at the forefront. It was because an unexpected person was waiting. Tap! Sun Yun lightly descended from his horse, and he performed a fist-palm salute to someone waiting. Bright Blade King Sun Yun pays his respects to Vice Leader Mong. In response to that greeting, a man who appeared to be in his early 40s with snake-like eyes, white hair, and no beard, reciprocated with a fist-palm salute and said, "You must have had a tough journey, Bright Blade King." The man responding was none other than Mong Xiaoqian, the second in command of Heaven and Earth Society. It was quite rare for the vice leader to come out and greet him personally, even if Sun Yun was one of the 5 kings. Sun Yun laughed heartily and replied, "Ah, what hardship could there be? I just went out to get some fresh air after a long time." It was a mission that could have been dangerous, as you had to cross the territory of the Righteous Alliance, yet only Bright Blade King would say he went out for fresh air. Anyone who sees this might think I've returned victorious from a war. Let's end the formalities here. Where is the leader? He had to report since he was given a special mission. At that question, Vice Leader Mong let out a soft sigh and opened his mouth. Bright Blade King. That's precisely why I came out personally to urgently convey the leader's order. Urgently convey an order? What do you mean? Bright Blade King Sun Yun asked, puzzled. He had even sent a messenger pigeon to inform them of the general situation, so he didn't know what this was about. Vice Leader Mong said to him in a whispering voice, "The leader has ordered to send everyone you brought, without exception, to the Corpse Blood Valley immediately." That's quick. Well, that's why I brought them anyway. Not just them. What? The leader said to also send the child from Yun Mok Sword Manor who allegedly learned that thing, and the child you brought as a hostage to the Corpse Blood Valley. At those words, Bright Blade King Sun Yun frowned and said, "What does that mean? Did he really give that order?" "Yes." At the firm answer, Sun Yun was momentarily at a loss for words. Although he couldn't retrieve the secret manual itself, for the first time in 100 years, someone had appeared who read that cursed manual and learned the sword techniques of the Moon lineage, whose lineage had been severed. Yet he was told to send him to the Corpse Blood Valley without even verifying it? That can't be. I will go and see the leader right away. You can't meet the leader now. What are you saying? This is an order directly given by the leader. In that case, he should at least extract the oral secrets from the boy's mind before sending him. This is Bright Blade King. He said it was an order given with the leader's authority. Ha! Bright Blade King Sun Yun was genuinely at a loss. However, the leader's orders were absolute. Thud. Someone roughly opened the door of the luggage carriage and entered. It was none other than diviner Zhou Yuigong. Mok Jiangun said, "We've arrived. Things have gotten complicated." What? At Zhou Yuigong's sudden words, Mok Jiangun asked back, puzzled. What do you mean things have gotten complicated? In response to that question, Zhou Yuigong replied in a somewhat absurd tone. The leader has ordered to send you to the Corpse Blood Valley. Corpse Blood Valley? Ha! For such a ridiculous situation to unfold. I have no idea what you're talking about. There's no time. First take this. What Zhou Yuigong took out from his bosom and handed over was a ring with tiny letters engraved on it. Mok Jiangun's eyes sparkled upon seeing the letters engraved on the ring. They were incantations used for specific talismans. You can perform sorcery with hand seals for a few things engraved here even without talismans. How do I? Listen carefully. The probability of surviving intact in the Corpse Blood Valley is less than 1 in 10. What does that mean? Survive somehow. I will report to the branch leader and get you out of there no matter what, so endure at all costs. By endure you mean? It was at that moment. This is as far as you go. Rumble rumble. Before Mok Jiangun's words could finish, warriors wearing red belts and red headbands barged into the luggage carriage. You. Mok Yuqion, who had regained consciousness, glared at Mok Jiangun. He had been unconscious for half a month, with his fainting acupoint struck except for 2 meals a day and 1 chance to relieve himself. Naturally, he couldn't help but be angry at Mok Jiangun, who had done such a thing. What have you done to me? Thwack. Ugh. However, he couldn't say anything due to a warrior striking him from behind with a staff. Although the fainting acupoint, mute acupoint and paralysis acupoint were released, he couldn't even resist because a needle called the Forbidden Gate Lock was inserted into his 6 major acupoints, sealing his internal energy. Hey, shut up and walk. Mok Yuqion, who had been twitching his lips in displeasure, soon closed his mouth and obeyed the order. For now he had no choice but to follow their commands. Shit. He didn't know what kind of humiliation this was as soon as he woke up. Is this how Heaven and Earth Society treats hostages? He was walking in a single line on a dark and narrow sloping path, following the person in front, and it felt like being captured as a prisoner and going to perform forced labor. What are they trying to do? Unlike the confused Mok Yuqion, Mok Jiangun was exceptionally calm. It was also because he already knew something had gone wrong due to diviner Zhou Yuigong's warning. What is the Corpse Blood Valley? For now that was the only question he had. What were they doing that they even inserted the Forbidden Gate Lock and sent them there? Even Chong Ryong didn't know what the Corpse Blood Valley was. With that question in mind, they walked for about 3 hours without rest, and soon a wide and shallow valley with torches lit on all sides came into view. Were there this many? Countless boys were waiting there lined up in rows. With the addition of the 100 or so people including Mok Jiangun and Mok Yuqion, there seemed to be roughly 800 at a glance. As they arrived like that, a resounding voice rang out. Welcome to the Corpse Blood Valley. Everyone's gaze turned in that direction. There was a large incense burner and a huge rock. On top of that rock stood a man wearing a gray demon mask, with his hands behind his back looking arrogant. As everyone looked, the demon mask opened his mouth. From now on there is something you must do. With those words he took something out from his bosom. It was none other than an iron ball that seemed to be the size of a finger joint. What is it? What are they trying to do? As everyone wondered what it was, the demon mask said, the designated time is 2 hours. In the valley water there are iron balls that look similar to this. Find them and come to this large incense burner. Those who fail to find them will die. Chapter 55. Heaven and Earth Society. 2 people were walking side by side on a path surrounded by a wall leading to the main building. They were Bright Blade King Sun Yun, one of the 8 executives of Heaven and Earth Society and one of the 5 kings, and diviner Zhou Yuigong. While walking, Zhou Yuigong spoke as if frustrated. I should have told the vice leader that I accepted him as my disciple. At his words, Bright Blade King Sun Yun clicked his tongue and replied, it's no use even if you tell him. Why is that? Have you ever seen the leader withdraw an order once given? At those words, diviner Zhou Yuigong couldn't open his mouth. As Sun Yun said, the leader never took back an order once given, and sometimes even punished severely if it couldn't be carried out. Considering that, persuasion was unlikely to work. TSK, I thought I had finally found a useful fellow. Is he even useful? He was the first to read that cursed secret manual. How many people had died trying to read it? Moreover, he learned the sword techniques of the moon lineage that had been severed 100 years ago, yet they sent such a fellow to the Corpse Blood Valley without even seeing his face. This was an incomprehensible decision no matter how much the leader did it. The Corpse Blood Valley is a place where nearly 8 or 9 out of 10 people die, even though each faction sends somewhat useful fellows. It wasn't called by a name meaning corpses and blood for nothing. I'll have to ask the Valley Master to report it for now. I can't just let that precious fellow die like this. At those words, Sun Yun looked at Zhou Yuigong with interested eyes. He wouldn't say this unless he really liked him. He too found the fellow to be a waste. If they persuaded him properly and made him an ally or extracted the sword techniques from his mind and revived the moon lineage, it would be good, so why not do that? Why send him to the Corpse Blood Valley, which could be considered the worst selection process? Could it be? Bright Blade King Sun Yun's eyes narrowed. Could the reason for sending him to the Corpse Blood Valley be that? Are they trying to test him? Corpse Blood Valley. The designated time is 2 hours. In the valley water there are iron balls that look similar to this. Find them and come to this large incense burner. Those who fail to find them will die. Murmur, murmur. At the words of the man wearing the demon mask, the boys stirred. It was the middle of the night now. Although warriors wearing red belts were holding torches here and there was no way the inside of the valley water would be properly visible. In this dark place filled with countless pebbles, finding that small iron ball? It was literally like finding a needle in a sand beach. At that moment, a boy who appeared to be around 17 years old, standing in the front row, raised his hand and spoke. Isn't it too harsh to kill someone for failing to find a mere iron ball? Everyone here has been recruited from each faction, so even if that's the case. Do you not want to do it? The demon mask interrupted and asked. The boy hesitated with a tense expression and soon said, the selection process doesn't seem to be about finding or not finding the iron ball. Smack. Thud. Ugh. At that moment, before he could even finish speaking, the boy's dying scream was heard as he collapsed on the ground. Those next to him couldn't hide their bewilderment upon seeing this. That's because the iron ball was deeply embedded in the boy's brow, and it seemed he had died instantly because of it. As they were taken aback, the demon mask spoke in a loud voice. Those who question the orders or give up will also die. The murmuring sound instantly turned into silence. Everyone realized the reality now that someone had lost their life. These crazy bastards. Ma Qiqian cursed inwardly. It was absurd to suddenly order such a thing, but die if you can't find the iron ball? He had come as a hostage for the sake of his family. Yet he didn't know what kind of nonsense this was for someone like him. If only they hadn't blocked my chi channels. If he could focus his inner vision, he might have found it more easily. But with his internal energy sealed, this was literally an act of bringing hardship upon oneself. While he was thinking that, the demon mask spoke. By the way, there aren't as many iron balls in the valley as there are people here. So you better hurry. There aren't as many iron balls as the number of people here? Everyone couldn't hide their bewilderment. Doesn't that mean some of them will definitely die? The moment the incense stick burns out is the 2-hour mark. Light it. At the demon mask's order, one of the warriors in red belts waiting next to the large incense burner lit an incense stick. Sizzle. Then the boys who had been murmuring and not knowing what to do rushed toward the valley all at once. With 800 people running at once, the ground shook for a moment. Everyone seemed to have their chi channels blocked as no one used lightness skills. At least it could be considered a fair situation. Shit. Seeing this, Ma Qiqian glared at Mok Jiangun but soon ran like the other boys. Splash. Fush. There was no other way in the current situation. He had to find the iron ball first. Otherwise he would die. Ma Qiqian, who had entered the valley following the other boys, looked down. Shit. How was he supposed to find this? It was dark. No, he could barely see the ripples of the water and he couldn't see what was inside the water. Finding it with the naked eye was impossible. Pop-pop-pop-pop-pack. Ugh. Where the hell is it? Aya. Frustrated voices of the boys could be heard here and there. They too couldn't see inside the water, so it seemed they were digging through the pebbles in the valley water with their hands to find it. Naturally, as a result, arg. And my hand. Their hands were bound to get injured. Some even broke their fingernails while recklessly flipping over rocks. If they protected their hands with internal energy, such things would be rare, but it was natural to get hurt with bare hands. Swish. Ma Qiqian's fingers also hurt from being scratched by sharp rocks and pebbles. But there was no other way. There was no way to find the iron ball other than using his hands. What if he couldn't find it within an hour? Thump thump. As he became anxious, his heart raced. He had never experienced this kind of tension in his life. Then Mok Yucheon turned his head slightly and made an absurd expression. What is that guy doing? Everyone was busy jumping into the valley water to search. But that bastard Mok Jaeon was just watching with his arms crossed. He was acting as if it was someone else's business. Crazy bastard. Instead of coming into the valley and checking what's inside, what the is he doing over there? Has he gone mad wanting to die? Mok Yucheon, who found it ridiculous, soon turned his gaze away. Whether they were half-brothers or not, if he couldn't find his share of the iron ball now, he would die. Pop-pop-pop-pop-pack. While everyone was frantically digging through the valley water like this, the incense stick had already burned down nearly halfway. The 2 hours were almost up. Now only half the time remained. It was at that moment. Put it out. With a shout, the warriors in red belts holding torches between the valley water threw the torches into the water, extinguishing them. It was already dark, but with the torches on the water gone, it became difficult to even see the people around. Shit. How are we supposed to find it? Complaints erupted from here and there. But even as they screamed like that, they didn't take their hands out of the water. Because if they didn't find it, they would lose their lives. Valley Master. This time more than half might be weeded out. A middle-aged warrior next to the demon mask whispered. That's because no one had found it even as the 2 hours were almost up. Until now there would be 1 or 2 people who found the iron ball within 2 hours in each group. But this time there was no one. Seems like there aren't many tough ones. The one called Valley Master, the demon mask, nodded in agreement. It might be the least number of people selected in history. By now 1 or 2 people should have found the iron ball and brought it, making the rest more anxious and focus on their senses like crazy. This was a gateway to stimulate the 5 senses and survival instincts. Those who were eliminated here were worthless beings with no value to survive. The Esoteric Realm Gate, 1, Vermilion Slaughter Valley Who, and Demon Fire Hall 3, said they sent talented individuals, but they seemed to be nothing more than trash compared to what I expected. While he was thinking that, it happened. I found it. Finally, the first person to find the iron ball among this group appeared. It was an 18-year-old boy, and although the hand holding the iron ball was covered in blood and a mess, he was smiling brightly, showing how happy he was. Seeing the boy like this, those around him couldn't hide their envy. But soon, as if realizing there was no time, they dug through the pebbles in the water even more. Splash. Fush. Huff huff. Somewhat tired, the boy who found the iron ball walked towards the shore, exhaling rough breaths. I did it. I did it. To have such luck. Not only did he survive, but he was the first to find it. With this, he could make a good impression. It was at that moment when he was feeling good. Splash splash. The sound of someone running from behind was heard. Looking back, a burly-looking boy was running towards him. Hand it over. He targeted him so blatantly. It seemed he was trying to snatch it before he got out of the water. There was bound to be 1 or 2 of these bastards. Shit. The boy was tired but ran like crazy. Even after getting out of the water, the burly-looking boy showed no intention of giving up and shouted as he ran. You bastard. If I catch you, I'll beat you to a pulp. Pop-pop-pop-pop-pack. The guy was not only big but also too fast. He didn't expect him to close the distance this much. If he was really caught, the iron ball he had worked so hard to find would be snatched away by that guy. The boy turned his head slightly and tried to run with all his remaining strength. However, when did this guy get in front of him? Was there someone who didn't enter the valley? The startled boy tried to change direction, but at that moment, the boy who was in front of him rushed towards him at a tremendous speed. He was so fast that he was caught before he could even change direction. This damn bastard. Their internal energy should be sealed too, so how can he be this fast? It was literally a situation of being caught between a rock and a hard place. Enemies in front and back. As the situation became urgent, the boy made an unexpected choice. You think I'll let scum like you snatch this? The boy put the iron ball he was holding into his mouth right there and gulped it down. The burly boy who saw this from behind shouted in frustration. You son of a bitch. This way it couldn't be snatched away. The boy grinned. However, you're really troublesome. Huh. The boy's head was grabbed by 2 hands. Then, crack. At that moment his neck was twisted. The boy, with his neck broken, died on the spot without even being able to scream. The burly-looking boy who had chased him up to 5 steps behind couldn't hide his bewilderment. He too had intended to snatch the iron ball, but he hadn't planned to kill the boy in front of him. Yet such a thing had happened right before his eyes. But what was even more shocking was squelch. Not only did he kill the boy, but he also ripped out the boy's throat with his bare hands. And then, forcibly shoving his hand below the neck. Flat. He took out the iron ball the dead boy had swallowed. The blood-soaked hand and iron ball. Drip drip. Blood stained the ground. To this crazy. The moment he saw this, the burly-looking boy was at a loss for words. What kind of guy is this? While he was taken aback, the beautiful boy No Mok Jung-un turned his head, shook his blood-soaked hand once on the ground and opened his mouth. Why? Do you want it? Shudder. At that question, the burly-looking boy shook his head like crazy. He had made eye contact with the guy and it felt like his heart would burst and his legs went weak as if he would collapse at any moment. Chapter 56. There is a saying that if you lose your momentum, it's over. The burly-looking boy had his momentum completely crushed by Mok Jung-un's cruel hands and couldn't even think of attacking. No, it would be more accurate to say he felt fear and terror. To this boy, Mok Jung-un said with a smile, "If you don't hurry, you won't be able to find this." Mok Jung-un shook the blood-soaked iron ball. Seeing this, the burly-looking boy seemed to have a moment of realization and tried to turn his body and run towards the valley. However, his legs soon gave out and he fell. After falling a few times like that, the boy barely managed to muster strength and enter the valley. Splash splash. But he wasn't the only boy turning his body like this. About 3 boys were returning to the valley with startled faces, and they too had aimed for the first iron ball like the burly boy. However, they also became terrified of Mok Jung-un. He's completely crazy. No matter what, this is too much. He killed without hesitation to snatch it just to survive. Moreover, the way he killed was enough to make one click their tongue. A fear was etched that if they attacked recklessly, they too might end up like that. There was someone who let out an exclamation while watching this scene. He was the man in the demon mask called Valley Master by the warriors in red belts. A warrior next to the demon mask said to him, "Looks like we've got a real piece here." Indeed. I don't think I've ever seen it progress like this before. The real weeding out should have started with that one iron ball. This wasn't simply about who found the iron ball first. Making the number of iron balls less than the number of people and extinguishing the torches were all calculated actions. The first iron ball was the signal flare for the weeding out process. A fight would break out to claim that one, and through this, everyone would realize. It didn't end with just finding the iron ball. The real key was how to protect it and bring it to the incense burner. But the beginning had changed. By the way, not only is his hand technique remarkable, but his strength is no joke. To rip out a throat so easily even with the chi channels sealed by the forbidden gate lock. Most of the warriors were amazed by Mok Jung-un's cruel hand techniques and strength. However, the demon mask was intrigued from a different perspective. To obtain the iron ball without getting a single drop of water on his clothes. It was the first time since taking charge of the Corpse Blood Valley. It was a case of acquiring the iron ball without even entering the water. Since an example was made by killing one person and a time limit was set by lighting the incense stick, no matter how cunning one was, they would typically jump into the valley water first. But even though everyone else ran, that fellow stayed in his spot alone. It means he aimed for it from the beginning. Interesting. Has there ever been such a cunning fellow while conducting this gateway? It was something that couldn't be done without considerable boldness. Thinking this way, even his cruel hand technique seemed to be intentionally calculated. Meanwhile, Mok Jung-un approached the front of the incense burner. Is this enough? Mok Jung-un showed the blood-stained iron ball to the demon mask sitting on the rock. The demon mask nodded and shouted. Then he opened his mouth. What is your name? At that question, the eyes of the surrounding warriors sparkled with interest. That's because it was quite rare for the demon mask, the Valley Master, to show interest to the extent of asking for a name in the mere first gateway of the Corpse Blood Valley. At that moment, Mok Jung-un replied, Mok Jung-un. At those words, the eyes visible through the gaps in the mask narrowed. Mok Jung-un? Since the number of people reached 800, he wasn't accurately aware of each individual. But he remembered the name Mok Jung-un. It was because he had received an order to have him join late. Is he one of the 2 from the Mok family who were brought as hostages? This was another surprise. He naturally thought he would be from a place with a notorious reputation among the esoteric realm Gate Vermilion Slaughter Valley Demon Fire Hall, or the recruited groups. But to hear he was from Yun Mok Sword Manor, known as a righteous and famous martial family. The demon mask recalled what had happened just half an hour ago. What? You're saying to have the boys from Yun Mok Sword Manor who were brought as hostages also join the Corpse Blood Valley? It's the leader's order. I will naturally obey if it's an order, but are you sure? It's not a place those weak boys from a righteous faction can endure. That's not something you need to be concerned about, so follow the order. He thought it was fine if they intended to torment them a bit and then kill them. But seeing this, his thoughts changed. As expected, the leader couldn't have sent them without a reason. So this was it. But unexpected. If he hadn't known the fact that he was from Yun Mok Sword Manor, he never would have thought he was from the righteous faction. Everything from the aura he exuded to everything else was rather closer to this side. I'll know if I watch him. If he's a fellow closer to this side, he will survive somehow in the Corpse Blood Valley known as Hell. The demon mask, who had been staring intently at Mok Jaeongun, took something out from his bosom. Then, take it. He flicked it towards Mok Jaeongun with his finger. Swish. What he flicked with his finger flew accurately towards Mok Jaeongun's chest. Mok Jaeongun caught it with one hand. This is. It was a thin, round silver plaque with the character 1 engraved on it. It's a plaque proving you passed this gateway with the highest score. Keep it along with the iron ball you brought. Gateway. Highest score. Mok Jaeongun inwardly wondered as he looked at the silver plaque. From the use of the term highest score, he could infer one fact. Is it a competition? Listen carefully. The probability of surviving intact in the Corpse Blood Valley is less than 1 in 10. Based on what diviner Zhou Yuigong had said, it seemed to be a structure of surviving through competition. 2 had already died. No, if his prediction was correct, a bloody competition would soon begin. Splash splash. Mok Jaeongun's prediction was spot on. Someone else had found an iron ball. Since some had seen the first boy who found it foolishly cheering and causing trouble, they didn't do such a thing this time. The moment they found it, they ran out of the valley water. It was certainly the right choice, but looks like that guy found it. Catch him. He stood out too much. Running out of the valley water alone naturally drew attention. More than a dozen people rushed at the same time to catch the guy. Shit. It was a chaotic scene of running away. But then someone jumped out of the water, grabbed the guy's neck and twisted it like Mok Jaeongun had done. Crack. Fush. With that, the second death occurred. After snatching the iron ball from the dead guy, he gestured at the charging boys and warned, "Come at me if you want to die." The 18-year-old boy who had taken off his top had a sturdy body, with bizarre patterns drawn all over his upper body. The boys who recognized this couldn't charge at him in anger. Shit. It's the Vermilion Slaughter Valley. Vermilion Slaughter Valley. It was one of the 3 most notorious groups under Heaven and Earth Society. Despite having only about 30 disciples, each and every one of them was a formidable master, and everyone found them creepy and feared them for their unique martial arts and secret techniques. What a bunch of cowards. The boy, who ran a hand through his hair, spoke in a disappointed tone and strode towards the incense burner. As the boy brushed past Mok Jaeon, he whispered, "Don't think you'll stay ahead in the next gateway." It was a clear declaration. In response, Mok Jaeongun shrugged his shoulders. He had no desire to waste energy on unnecessary things. If he annoys me, he licked his upper lip as if his interest was piqued. This place seemed quite nice, because he didn't have to be mindful of killing like at Yun Mok Sword Manor. The boy from the Vermilion Slaughter Valley, who didn't see Mok Jaeongun's face, went to the front of the incense burner and showed the iron ball to the demon mask. Pass. In the meantime, chaos erupted here and there near the valley water. Those who found iron balls appeared one after another, and as they ran towards the incense burner, the boys who were desperate from not finding them rushed in and fights broke out. And those fights went beyond simply subduing each other, creating a situation of killing and being killed. It has begun. At the warrior's words, the demon mask nodded and looked in that direction. At the point where 2 had already died, the boys no longer hesitated to harm and kill each other. The area near the valley water was a complete pandemonium. Poop. Kook. Amidst that, there were a few who stood out. A beautiful girl with short hair and a pale face found a sharp-shaped rock somewhere and was advancing forward, mercilessly stabbing those who charged at her. Despite not being able to use internal energy, her movements were so fast that the charging boys were helplessly defeated. I know who that wench is. It's the Demon Fire Hall. You recognized her. How could he not recognize her? That swift and efficient dagger technique that only targeted vital points. It was the linked killing of the Demon Fire Hall. Although they are now called the 3 Great Assassin Groups, the Demon Fire Hall was once called the 4 Great Assassin Groups. However, they quit the assassin business and came under Heaven and Earth Society. Impressive. She only grasped a sharp rock, but if her internal energy seal was released, it was enough to have expectations. While that was happening, the demon mask pointed at someone with his hand. That boy seems to be from the Esoteric Realm Gate. Oh my! An exclamation slipped from the warrior's mouth. A boy with a muscular and sturdy physique was charging forward like a bull, and the boys he collided with couldn't withstand it and were sent flying. Pupiupuk. The Esoteric Realm Gate was renowned for their external technique called Iron Thread Technique. And indeed, perhaps because they trained their external energy instead of internal energy, his physical strength was tremendous. Hoo. The boy from the Esoteric Realm Gate, who had pushed away all the numerous charging boys and arrived. Pass. And following him, the girl from the Demon Fire Hall also arrived. Pass. Like this, in addition to them, boys arrived one by one in front of the incense burner, engaging in a bloody fight to claim the iron balls. Among them, there was a boy who had been waiting for this moment. This boy had actually obtained an iron ball before anyone else, but he had been waiting for it to become a chaotic battle, fearing that he would become a target if he came out when no one had found it yet. The boy ran to the front of the incense burner with great difficulty, held up the iron ball and shouted, "I found it." The boy smiled, the corners of his mouth twitching. In fact, before the iron ball search began, the boy had secretly taken the one embedded in the forehead of the boy who had been killed by the demon mask for raising a question. Stupid fools. There was such an easy way. It seemed foolish that no one was aware of this. While he was thinking that, the demon mask shouted, "Fail." What? It's exactly as I said. What does this mean? Why did he not pass? He couldn't understand. Why? I clearly found the iron ball, so why? Swish. At that moment, something sharp brushed past his neck. Soon the boy's head fell to the ground. "I'm sure I told you not to question the orders." Clang. The warrior in the red belt who had decapitated him muttered and sheathed his sword into the scabbard at his waist. Thud. As the boy fell with his neck severed, the iron ball dropped from his hand and rolled on the ground. The rolling iron ball stopped in front of Mok Jang-un, who had passed first and was sitting close to the incense burner. Seeing this, Mok Jang-un looked at the iron ball he was holding and chuckled. 63. The iron ball Mok Jang-un had was engraved with the small letters 63. However, the decapitated boy's iron ball had nothing engraved on it. He had used his wits but unluckily lost his head. On the other hand, should I say I was lucky? In fact, Mok Jang-un had also tried to extract the iron ball from the forehead of the boy who had died for raising a question before the start. But someone had already taken it in that short time, so he had changed his method. Thanks to that, he could be considered fortunate. However, this feeling didn't last long. Rather, Mok Jang-un licked his lips, regretting the feast unfolding before his eyes. Waft. As people died one after another due to the bloody fight over the iron balls, the energy of death overflowed all around. If only his chi channels weren't sealed by the forbidden gate lock, he would have performed the reverse chi circulation right away. But did he really need to gather this energy through chi circulation? Out of curiosity, Mok Jang-un slightly extended his arm towards the void in the direction where the death energy was flowing and chanted the oral secrets in his mind. Boundless and unceasing, the two energies combined to form the heart. It was the art of binding technique,